It's preparing to live stream the meeting right now. Okay, YouTube is ready.
All right. Well, first of all, these virtual garden series are coordinated by the Amory, the Augusta, the Clear Lake, and the Ellsworth libraries. And tonight's talk is about kitchen gardens. I'm Jeannie Cromie. I'm an Eau Claire area master gardener. Actually, this year I happen to be the president of the group. And we do a lot of different things as master gardeners. It's been a little limited now with COVID because there's so many rules and things, but we do a lot as far as education. And we like to work with children, adults, whoever, answer questions and provide education. I took the class to be a gardener, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, but I've really been gardening since I was a little kid. I always spent all my evenings out pulling weeds because I just really enjoyed that quiet time in the garden with the things that are growing. You know, you can see progress, you can see growth. It's really exciting. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about kitchen gardens. And kitchen gardens are for pretty much anyone. There's my grand kitty, Apollo. He loves catnip, so he likes the kitchen garden. Even cats, okay? Animals like your garden too. All right, kitchen gardens, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of them, why you might invest in putting in a kitchen garden or growing it, the types of kitchen gardens you can have, you know, different sizes, different styles, and then really the season you want to grow things. Now, some people really are just a summer gardener. Some people want to be an all-year gardener, and that's okay. There's different ways you can grow things all year. And then how to go about getting started, how to start putting together a kitchen garden. All right, let's start with our history of kitchen gardens. This one here has a lot of herbs and flowers and that in it. Kitchen gardens have been around for nearly forever, I think. If you go to England or, you know, Europe somewhere, and you look at some of those old castles and castle grounds, a lot of them have castle gardens. Okay, so they had gardens all the way back years and years ago. And they may have even been kind of inside of the castle walls for protection to better grow things more year round and different times of the year. I think some of them even had, you know, similar to what we call greenhouses today. Now, why would they have had kitchen gardens? Well, poor people would have had them simply to eat. Your rich people, your kings, your whatever, might have had something just so that they could have out of season produce. They could have things they could grow out of season simply by making use of things like, you know, covers and greenhouses and protection. All right. So kitchen gardens have been around for a really long time. This is an example of a pioneer kitchen garden. This is a reenactment or whatever of a pioneer kitchen garden. Now, in the pioneer days, okay, they would have had a garden because there's no store down the street. What they grew is what they had. So you can see the fence here is pretty heavy duty because typically, you know, the cattle would be loose. So you don't want your cows to walk through your kitchen garden or any garden because, you know, that would ruin everything. You would have nothing to eat. So they did a pretty good job of putting up fences something like, you know, keeping the critters out like we have to do today. Our fences might not look like that, but we still do the same kind of thing. A fence to keep things in or keep things out. Okay. This is a type of kitchen garden that obviously it's a lot bigger than the other ones we've seen. This might have fed the entire community, or they might have done some canning, preserving of different produce. Now, that's a whole nother lesson, a whole nother class on canning and preserving. There's a lot of information on that. But this is just another idea of a kitchen garden. So a kitchen garden doesn't have to be little. It can be huge. It can be any size, any type, depending on your needs and what you're looking to grow in it. Okay, so what is a kitchen garden? Well, it can be made up of any or all of these things. I might put herbs in my garden. I might put flowers, fruit. I could have a orchard, vegetables, and beneficials. When we talk about beneficials, I think of things that assist your other things, maybe to keep the pests away, and maybe to help some other things grow, you know, because sometimes you need different things to feed the soil. You need to plant something one year to feed the soil for the next year, for something else to grow. There's a lot of different things to consider when you're looking at beneficials. Now, the reason for some of these things to think about is, you know, well, what kind of space do I have? Do I have limited space? Do I have a lot of space? What am I going to do with the space I have? What am I going to grow? So why do we want that kitchen garden? Well, I do a lot of drying herbs. I use a lot of herbs. I have a whole shelf in my pantry of herbs that I've dried. Now, sometimes I use a dehydrator, you know, but you don't need one. A lot of times I'll take and just my parsley will be getting really big. I'll trim it all off. And when I take the pizza out of the oven and shut the oven off, I put a tray of the parsley in the oven. By the time the oven has cooled, the parsley, I can crunch it up or chop it up and put it in a bag, and I've got dried herbs just like that. Obviously you want to, you know, clean it and wash it and get all the bugs off before you do that. But that's an easy way to dry some herbs. I might want vegetables to feed my family. Okay. It depends on what your family likes to eat, what you're going to grow. Beneficials, bug control. Now, there's quite a few different flowers and different things that will help with bug control. I've got a list, I've got books everywhere. Okay, so just to tell you, even gardeners don't know everything, but they know how to look things up. That's the important part. But some, they call them the Fab Five in this book. There's 5 flowers that are very useful for keeping other bugs away. Asters, calendula, chrysanthemums, geraniums, and marigolds. Well, we know marigolds, they smell. They keep a lot of things away. But they've come out with a lot of new geraniums that I see when I'm shopping and things. There's scented geraniums. There are geraniums to keep away mosquitoes. There's geraniums to keep away rabbits. There's, you know, a lot of different plants that you can use for bug control or pest control rather than chemicals, all right? So you can get regular plants. Onions or garlic. I like to plant those right along the edge of my garden because it tends to keep the moles from coming into the garden because they don't like to go through the onions. You know, groundhogs, moles, they don't like to go through past those onions. So that's one way that I keep things kind of under control in the edge of my garden. This book tells me that daffodils and hyacinths will keep the mice and the rats away. Well, that's an early spring plant though, so they don't grow all year. So you have to think about, you know, when you're planting things, how useful it's going to be. My onions I can leave in the garden all year, to keep those moles away. And then some of these flowers, they're going to bloom at different times. So you have to think about when are they going to keep the critters or the pests away? Is it going to be helpful? The beauty of vegetables, flowers, herbs, some of them are just pretty to look at the way they are. You can pick them, you can have them growing in your garden, whatever. Sometimes it's just for the look. The scent, you know, I like the scent of herbs myself. I'd rather smell herbs than smell flowers, but that's just, you know, a preference. So there's a lot of different reasons why I might want to grow some things and grow some vegetables. And then again, you know, when I ask the question, why do I want a kitchen garden? I'm going to say, well, why not? You know, gardening's great, but it's not for everyone. And that's the important thing to think about. You know, if you're tentative about gardening, we're going to talk about starting simple and starting small, because you don't want to overextend, because then you just get frustrated and not want to do it. Some of the other things you can use your herbs and your flowers and things for might be some poopery. I've made lotions with herbs. You can get oils out of some things. You can use things for cooking. The good thing is that a lot of the things you can grow yourself are very safe, organic, you know, rather than purchasing products from the store. Okay. Let's look at some different types of kitchen gardens that you could use. This is my sister's herb garden that her husband built for her. And that was when she was first planting in it. But why would I want my herb garden something like this? Well, number one, it's right next to her deck. She comes out of her kitchen, down the steps, and she picks the herbs and she's right back there ready to cook. They're real close, okay? They're easy to get to. They're right close where she wants to use them. And another reason to put it in a bed like this, some herbs will spread. Okay, some herbs will take over. They'll spread and they will take over. Mint is a good one. Oregano, chives, dill, they tend to just keep spreading and getting bigger. And if you put them in a box or a container like this, you can contain them. You can keep them from taking over the rest of your garden or space or whatever you are working with, all right? So that's one reason to put them in a bed like this. This one, this is another sister. This sister actually lives in Oregon. She's actually a master gardener also. This is her rosemary. It's contained with this concrete wall along her house there, because you see rosemary can spread too. Here, rosemary, mostly in Wisconsin, is usually an annual. Sometimes you can get a perennial version, but it tends to die out here in the winter. It's too cold. Where she lives, it's warmer. It grows year round, and she can, you know, it'll keep spreading. But here, my rosemary, I plant it in a pot so that I can sit it out all summer in this big clay pot in my flower bed, and I can bring it in the fall and have rosemary all winter. Rosemary, I do that. Sometimes parsley, I'll do that, because I like to use those things in the winter, and they winter over nicely if you keep them trimmed. Again, this rosemary is close to her door. It smells really great when you walk past there. And it's contained. It can't spread beyond really what that bed is there. And it's pretty easy to trim back. You know, she can get to it. If your flower bed or your place you're working with is, you know, 6 foot wide, and you're trying to trim the middle, it's a little challenging. You have to climb in it, you know. This way, this is only 2 foot wide. She can reach the whole thing and trim it back. This sister also has a huge bay tree that we can't grow here, but it's really great, because whenever I need bay leaves, I call her up and she dries some and sends me some just for cooking. Okay, so let's see. This here is a pot. This actually happens to be some dahlias in there, but I want to talk about growing things in a pot. you can grow a lot of different vegetables in a pot. So you might not have a garden space. You may not have a place where you can put a big raised bed, but you can grow in a pot. Okay. I did this when I lived in Europe for a couple of years. I had like window pots sitting on a patio. I grew carrots, I grew lettuce, I grew radishes, all in little window pots because it's all I had available. And, you know, it's really hard on a gardener when you have nothing to garden. So I had little window pots and I grew all kinds of things in those. Now, this works good for some of those type of things, lettuce, carrots, maybe peppers, your herbs. You can grow herbs in pots. Tomatoes, I grow a cherry tomato in a pot every year for my daughter. I get it growing good and then give it to her and hope she keeps it alive because she does not have a green thumb. But she loves the cherry tomatoes, so she tries to keep that alive. And you can grow that in a pot. If you look in seed catalogs, if you have access to them or whatever, I like to look in seed catalogs for the different varieties that grow small. For example, I'm not going to grow a carrot that gets 12 inches long in a 6 inches deep pot. I'm going to look for the carrots that grow really short in my pot. And that's the kind I want to grow then. So there's different varieties for different things. You can get short ones, you can get, you know, things that will grow better in a pot, in a container. Early crops, like your lettuce and your spinach, they like to grow when it's really cool out. Okay, so if I'm growing them when it's really cool out and I plant them like early, like even now or even earlier, and then we have, you know, that where Wisconsin thinks it was spring and it really wasn't, and we get 6 inches of snow. Okay, I don't want those things to get buried. They're okay with cool weather, but they don't want to be under a snowbank for a while. So because I have them in a pot, I can just bring them in. I can drag that pot in the garage. I might have it on a something with wheels under it, and I can just bring it right in the garage and protect it, or under the eaves or under somewhere for a little bit of protection when we're at that late snowstorm. Okay, I know we've been known to have heavy frost in June. That won't hurt your spinach and your lettuce to get a frost, but like I said, 6 inches of snow would not make it happy. So that's the kind of thing, you know, if I grow it in a pot, I can bring it in. I can also start some of those other things like peppers and tomatoes in pots and be able to bring them in when it's too cold out for them, so that they can, you know, get started, get growing, but not be frozen. The only thing you have to think about with some of those type of things, like your peppers especially, if you just grow a pepper in a pot all by itself, you may not get peppers. You have to pollinate it. So you may end up out there with a Q-tip pollinating your pepper, unless you can get it outside for a while and there's, you know, bees and things out there, bugs that will pollinate it for you. Otherwise, that could be a problem. Okay. What else do we have on this? Oh, I want to show you my herb garden in the spring. This is what it looks like a week ago. It's kind of a sideways view of it. I have an herb garden here that is right in front of my window, and it's sandwiched between a sidewalk and a, you know, window there, and there's a big bay window in front of it. Now, because of that, and it faces southeast, of course, the sunshine's on that bay window and on the white wall there, and this gets really warm, really early. And so that's why I've planted my tulips and my daffodils and my hyacinths. They're all in this flower bed also, because they grow early, they do their thing, and they die back, and then my herbs have room. So they kind of share the space, because a lot of the herbs take longer to get going. You can see on the right-hand side there, the chives, they're going great already. but you know, behind it there, you can't really see it very well, the lavender, and at the bottom we have the savory, and it's a little brown yet. It's starting to turn green, but it's a little later. All right. So this bed gets really warm really early, which means things start growing. I have been known to have to cover it with, you know, something because the tulips will all freeze. Um, but it does get nice, early, warm weather, so I get herbs quite quickly and quite early. Right. Um, okay, yes, even flowers can be in your kitchen garden. These are some of my morning glories that have gone wild. This is right next to that herb garden. You can see that bay window I was referring to in the side there. And so I have a trellis here, and well, a couple times I planted morning glories. I don't have to plant them anymore because they just come up from seed. They drop all their seed and they come up every year. And I get morning glories like crazy. They are happy there. They like that sunshine. They like that protection in the corner of the house there. So yeah, I get morning glories. All right, this happens to be my hibiscus tree. And I just wanted to show you this to talk a little bit about bringing things in and out. Now, this hibiscus tree sits on my deck all summer. And right to the left of this picture is the door that goes off the deck into the house. So in the wintertime, it sits just inside that door. So it gets the same type of light. It's very close to the same type of light, except that it doesn't freeze because hibiscus, of course, is not hardy. This one isn't, so it needs to come in. And so I bring it right inside that door, and then it grows there all winter. And it pretty much blooms off and on all winter long, as long as I remember to water it. But that is another thing that, you know, a lot of plants that you want to try, tropical plants and things like that, it's great to grow them, but it's fun to get them outside for the summer and then bring them in for the rest of the year. Okay. This is not a kitchen garden, okay? This one, I actually visited my sister in Michigan, and this is a neighboring farm, a lavender farm. It is a whole field of lavender. We went out and picked some. She's friends with the people, and they said, well, it's got to be picked because we have to cut it off so that the growth will come back from the bottom. We have to cut the tops all off. And we went out there and we picked an entire bag full. And I think we picked it off of these bushes right here, and you can't even tell. They are so thick. But it was great. It really smelled wonderful and it looks beautiful. But that's a little bit much for a kitchen garden. You can grow lavender. You just don't probably need that much. Okay, how do we get started on that kitchen garden? First of all, you want to know what am I going to grow? Am I going to grow herbs, veggies, flowers? Maybe a mixed bag, maybe a little bit of everything. It depends on, okay. And then we have to think about where we're going to grow it. Location matters a lot because you need sun, you need shade, you need water, you know. Am I growing it on a patio or a deck? Am I growing it in the ground? I want to make sure that whatever I want to grow, my location matches. For example, I love a lot of shade-loving plants. I think shade-loving plants are just gorgeous. I go through the greenhouse, I look at all the shade-loving plants, and I have to walk away. I have no shade. My area here, I just have no place to plant anything shady. So I can't get those. It's frustrating, but I can't plant those because I have no shade. So you have to think about where I'm putting something and, you know, do I have what it needs? The location will matter a lot based on what I'm going to grow. So what's available? You know, if you're on the third floor of an apartment building, you might be limited to a pot. Okay, maybe you can get hooked up with somebody that has another garden or a community garden. There's some of those out there that you can try growing something different there, or learn some things from people that are growing things out there. One of the houses I lived in, I rented a house for a few years, and I didn't have a garden in my yard. But my neighbor was about half a mile down the road. They had a huge garden, and my children were very young, and the neighbors were quite elderly. But they grew this really big garden, but they couldn't manage it all. So I got to know them, and I could go over there and I could help them with their garden, and reap a lot of produce from it. So maybe you can get hooked up with somebody that you can work cooperatively in a garden. Okay. Access, easy access. Okay. Put your gardening where you can get to it. Don't put it on the, in the back of the garage if you never go there, because you're not going to take care of it. Okay. You want easy access to water. You want easy access to, get there and to weed it and to keep an eye on it. If I only go and look at my garden once a week, the bunnies might come and visit between, and I won't even know it. I won't know to try to prevent it because I wasn't there. I didn't have access to it. I just didn't get there to see it. All right. So now, start simple, I said earlier, and start small. Do I want to plant herbs? Do I want perennial herbs? Some of my herbs are perennials, and I don't have to do anything with them. My chives come back every year. I don't do anything with them. I can trim them off so they keep producing and don't go to flower. My dill reseeds itself. I get dill like crazy. I pull dill because it comes up everywhere. It reseeds itself and comes up thick. So I pull it, so I only keep a small patch of it. Otherwise, my entire garden would be dill. So those are things that are easy. I don't have to do anything with them. Basil, parsley, rosemary, those here are annuals, meaning I have to grow them every year. I have to start over every year. Now, parsley, I can winter it sometimes in the house and then put it back out again. Same with my rosemary. I've found that if I winter it one winter, maybe two, after that, it gets kind of old and you need to start over again anyway. So that's some different herbs, some things to think about. Do I want something I'm going to have to keep replanting? Vegetables, carrots, lettuce, radish, cherry tomato, pepper. Those are all easy. Small, you can get small varieties of those. You can get small ones. But like I always say, just plant what you like. Okay. Here's an example. When I was at home growing up, my mom had a huge garden. Well, she had 6 kids to help take care of it. Needless to say, I was the only one that liked taking care of it. But we were out there weeding and taking care of the garden a lot. She liked to experiment. So she always planted something unique and different every year just to see how it would grow. I still remember the year she planted okra. None of us would eat it. We didn't like okra. But it was an experiment. We loved it the year she planted peanuts. We thought that was great. We grew the peanuts, we dried them, we roasted them. That was great fun. So you can experiment if you have space and you want to do that. But if you're starting small, if you're starting simple, I would say plant the things you like to eat. Okay? Because if you don't want to eat it, you're not going to take care of it. Right? So I said, like before, pick those varieties that'll work in the space that you have. I have sandy soil. I can grow carrots that are really long. The sister I mentioned out in Oregon has clay. She plants really short carrots, even in her raised beds, because they won't get any bigger because her soil gets really, really hard. Okay. So, go with what is going to grow well in your location. So if I have pots, if I have sandy soil, if I have clay, wherever I'm planting something, I need to think about what I can grow there. Again, seed catalogs. I think most gardeners get quite a few seed catalogs. Once you get on a mailing list for a seed catalog, you'll get it forever. My mother, who hasn't had a garden in 5 years, is still getting seed catalogs, but she shares them with me. So we peruse seed catalogs because you can learn a lot in there. You can learn a lot about different varieties, and even if you don't order from them, you can still learn a lot of information from seed catalogs. Right? What do I need to get started? What do I need to get started growing things? Well, I need a piece of ground or a pot. Okay. Now, the piece of ground, first of all, is it good soil? How do I know if it's good soil? You can get a soil test done. Your local extension office, you can pay to have a soil test run if you want to. But a lot of it's common sense. You know, if this piece of ground has been being used to dump, you know, all kinds of chemicals and everything else in it, I'm sure not going to plant garden there. Okay. But, you know, you could try it, see what kind of soil it looks like, try it and see if you can grow something. A pot, you can use any kind of soil if you have a pot, but you have to think about, is that pot big enough for what I want? You know, you don't want to overfill a pot. You don't want to get, you know, too much, trying to grow too much in a small little pot. I have to think about my soil. If I have that piece of ground, is that soil very good? Maybe I need to add some compost, okay? And you can buy compost, or, you know, if you have a local farmer, you can get a little bit of natural compost and mix it in with your soil. You need something to dig with, all right? That doesn't have to be fancy. No fancy tools are really required to garden. There's tons of fancy tools out there, and some of us collect them and have fun with them. But if you're planting in a pot, an old fork will work. You know, you don't really need a fancy tool to dig things up with. You need some seeds or some starter plants, whichever you prefer. Now, if you're an impatient gardener, you might want to start with starter plants, and the greenhouses have those. And you can order those from seed catalogs. You can get seeds or starter plants. This picture here happens to be a little basil plant, which I have about a couple dozen of them started right now. They're about 2-3 inches high. And my goal is this week sometime to take them down to the Augusta Library there. And if you pop in there and have an appointment and go in, you could pick up yourself a little basil plant. I was planning to take them for the Saturday event. They were planning this Saturday, but I understand that's been postponed. So there will be some little basil plants there sometime in the next week. All right, do I have water? You need water. You can't grow things without water. But the other thing is, you don't want too much water. I see a lot of people that overwater things and they wonder why they rotted. Okay, your pot needs some drainage, or my ground needs some drainage. If I have a really, really heavy clay soil and I plant in the ground, it's going to stay wet. So when it rains, it's going to be maybe too wet. I might need to take that soil and add some compost and loosen it up a bit. You don't want to add sand. A lot of people mistakenly think that if I have clay, I should add sand to make it softer or lighter. But what is the formula for concrete? Clay and sand. So you don't want to add sand and clay, you'll end up with concrete. So you do want to make sure that it doesn't get too wet. If you have a pot, you can have drainage, you know, any kind of hole in the pot. One thing that people mistakenly think is that they need fancy garden pots. You can really use almost anything to grow things in. Just about any kind of pot or dish or anything that'll hold enough soil and have some drainage, you can grow something in it. You need some ambition and maybe a little excitement. All right. This is a good project to get your kids involved in. You can get them involved in planning. They can figure out, you know, what they want to grow, what they like to eat, how they, you know, what varieties to grow. Get them busy doing the research too. That's a good project. You can get them helping with the planting and the care. you know, somebody has to weed, but you need to know what's the weed. There's a challenge. Something I talked to my daughter-in-law this weekend, and my son said he had planted chives one year, and she says, oh yeah, I weeded those out. I thought they were weeds. So you need to make sure you figure out what's the weeds and what's the plants, especially if you have kids involved with it. You can have the kids involved with harvesting too. They get really excited when they get to eat what they grew. I have a granddaughter that likes to just kind of work her way through my garden and eat a little bit of everything. She will walk along and say, can I eat this? Can I eat this? Can I eat that? And she pretty much likes everything out there. You might possibly need a fence. Depends on how you grow or where you grow things. If you're doing a pot, you know, you can easily keep that from up high enough or whatever to keep the rabbits or whatever out of it. But if you're growing in the ground somewhere, you might need a little fence. You might need something to keep the rabbits out. Again, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be really nice. Just as long as it keeps out what you want kept out. Okay, so that you don't lose everything that you're trying to grow. There's challenges to consider when you're growing. Do I have easy access to water? Again, you're not going to tote the water clear across, you know, the property or out the front door and around the back of the house, behind the garage to water something. You need your access there, your water close. Am I going to get impatient waiting for growth? All right, we know sometimes that's the hardest part, waiting for things to grow. We get really impatient, we give up. That's something to consider. If you're going to grow something, do I start with bigger plants so I get something sooner? You can actually go to the greenhouse and you can buy lettuce that's already to eat. You can buy tomato plants with tomatoes that are starting to turn red, you know, so you don't have to wait a long time for the growth on those. But how much money do I want to invest? How much do I want to spend? Obviously, those plants are more expensive than buying some seed or buying some little tiny plants, okay? So you have to think about how much you want to invest in this process of gardening. Yes, you could get all the top of the line stuff, but then if you garden 1 year and decide it's not for you, that was kind of a pricey project, right? Is my cat going to dig it up? Well, if you plant catnip, probably. They like to roll in it. So if you're going to plant catnip for the cat, don't plant it next to something that you don't want them to roll on, because that's what they do. They like that. Do I have a healthy bunny and or deer population I'm going to be feeding? Okay. So if I know that I'm going to have the bunnies trying to mow off my lettuce, I have to either put a fence up, or I have to put it up in a raised pot, or I have to do something to keep them out of it, or I have to plant enough so that it's enough for both of us. That's probably not the most efficient way to do it, but it happens. Here I have never had a really high fence, so the deer can walk through my garden. But I've found by putting a lot of tomato cages and things in the garden that the deer don't like getting tangled up in those, so then they stay out of my garden. So there's ways to get around keeping the deer and the bunnies from eating everything. Will my neighbors or kids or landlord complain about my garden? You know, excuse me, as a child, I know my sisters hated pulling weeds. And so they didn't like going out in the garden as much as I did. Excuse me. So, you know, if you're going to plant a garden and expect your kids to take care of it, you know, is it something they want to do? I knew my children never cared for gardening, which made that my quiet place. I could go sit in the garden and they didn't bother me because they were afraid if they came out there, they'd get put to work. So that was my quiet place where I could get away from my young children, is to go out in my garden. How likely am I to stick with it? Am I going to stick with gardening? Again, if you make a big investment, then you feel like you have to. But if you start small, start simple, if you find out it's not for you, that's fine. You know, then you haven't invested a lot in it, and you can say, huh, that was an experiment. I tried it. I didn't like it, you know, and that happens. That's okay too. Do I have resources for advice? And my answer is yes, 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 yes. You have lots of resources. There are tons of places you can get advice on gardening. Your UW Extension horticulture site. There's also a learning store on the extension. That learning store has like, they're like PDF documents of all kinds of different things that you might want to ask about gardening. Your local library, your local extension office. Now, not last year, but in the past, the Master Gardeners, we always had a booth at the farmers market. People could come and ask us questions. Now we don't have that right now, or we haven't last year. I don't know if they're going to go back to doing that this year or not yet. But your local extension office is hooked into all the Master Gardeners, okay? So when you call the extension office with a question, a lot of times they farm the question out to one of the Master Gardeners that's their specialty. And we all have preferences of what we do as specialties. I like gardening. I do a lot of that. I do almost nothing with lawns. I have the resources to find the information about lawns, but lawn care is not really big on my list because I don't have a good lawn to care for. So it just depends, you know, we all have specialties and we can all answer different questions. Employees at your local greenhouse. Now, I don't know how successful you'll be at some of the big box stores with their greenhouse because they pretty much just hire someone to sell, but your real, you know, greenhouses themselves have experienced people that have grown things and know how to answer all your questions. So I think that is the end of what I have to present. And I don't know if there's any questions. Stacy, do we have anything out there on questions?
This is Cricket from Clear Lake. I'm not seeing
Right.
any questions.
You haven't? I haven't either. Great. Do you have any questions, Cricket?
I don't.
I
Your
know you're a
information is
master
very helpful.
gardener too.
Jeannie, I think we're going to end our presentation since we don't have any questions.
Sounds
Thank you
great.
very much for spending some of your evening with us.